The Hornets lose the second game in a row to the Boston Celtics at home. We hear MVP chants for the opposition and Jayson Tatum, who went for 50. We break it all down today on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
We're Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day, and we appreciate you making us your first listen. Make your second listen Locked On NBA, game to game across the Locked On NBA landscape, only on the Locked On Podcast Network. And today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's PrizePicks.com. Promo code Locked On. Weird day for me today. No Weston Walker because we were airing the Charlotte Hornets game on WFNZ 92.7 FM, where you can usually catch Weston Walker from 12 to 3. But that was instead reserved for the MLK Day game, the matinee, a annual tradition that is so much fun to get some daytime Hornets basketball. Like going to these games, was able to go to the Spectrum Center earlier today and watch some Hornets basketball. So very cool there. And Doug was writing all about it, I'm sure, on his Substack, Every Hornets Boxscore, at everyhornetsboxscore.com, where you can find that. All right, Doug, Boston Celtics loss. Jayson Tatum goes for 51. Steve Clifford, very talkative afterwards, and was sure to point out how he liked the Hornets' effort in this game. He said that they played sharper, I guess, and that the effort was there, and I think that's probably true, and then switched it 180 degrees and discussed how frustrated he was at the team continuing to leak out when it should be every single member of the Charlotte Hornets on the court going after defensive rebounds, and how those leak outs directly lead to losing. And even Jalen McDaniels, who was amazing in the first half, scored 18 points in the first, 26 overall, hit 5 3-pointers. That was a season high for three-point field goals made. Despite all that, Jalen McDaniels directly referenced in one of those. So, let's try to bring this down and organize it. You're much better at that than I am. How do we attack this first little recap as we start the show today?
Well, I think the big story from both of these games is that they are trying very hard. The Hornets are the effort is there. It's just the talent level isn't there. And Jayson Tatum is an immense talent. 51 points. He had the crowd rocking in Spectrum Center. A lot of green and white in the Spectrum Center. We'll get into that a little bit later. But they have a talent level such that, and it's across the board, right? It's more than just Tatum. It's Brogdon off the bench, who was devastating. It's Derek White hitting threes. It's Grant Williams, the hometown kid, knocking down threes. It's defense everywhere, scrambling. They got a lot at the rim, but it was kind of because they wanted the Hornets to take shots at the rim. That's the kind of defense that you play and go, wait a minute, we're getting open shots at the rim. Oh, that's because they want us to do that, because they don't want us to hit a bunch of threes. They're running us off the line. The Hornets shot well from three, but they just didn't shoot a ton because they didn't have a lot of opportunities. But yeah, I mean, these two games, I think, really sort of illustrate how far the Hornets are on both ends of the floor. And yes, they were able to pull close in the fourth quarter in this game. They were there at moments in the second half of the first game as well. But I really didn't have any belief that they had what it took to get over a team like Boston. And now here they sit. They've lost 8 out of the last 9 games. They've lost 5 in a row. The only game that they won was that. It's looking crazier by the day, that win that they had, the blowout win that they had against Milwaukee is looking more and more like it was about Milwaukee than it was about Charlotte. I just think we know who the Hornets are. I don't think they have any more surprises, even if, Gordon Hayward and Kelly Oubre, Cody Martin missed this game. He was a late scratch. If all these guys get back, I'm still not confident they have many surprises left for us this season.
No, I'm not confident at all. This was a role player game that allowed you to stay in it, and if you get more efficiency from your stars, then you might have a shot, but they didn't have it here today. LaMelo Ball was 8 of 23. He was a good three-point shooter, 5 of 12, but he missed a lot of two-point shots, which he's not been great at in his career, but missed quite a bit, 8 of 23 overall from the field. And Terry Rozier, after giving you a nice stretch of games for a while, Terry goes 6 of 17 from the field, only goes 1 of 4 from 3-point range, only 1 of 2 from the free throw line, and scores 14 points. And this is a college style lineup, in my opinion, at least as college as an NBA roster and rotation can be, because you're looking at 5 starters that all play above 30 minutes. You have your sixth man and Dennis Smith Jr., who plays 25. Mark Williams is that next guy. And the other ones, JT Thor, Bryce McGowan's. I don't want to call them faux minutes because they're in legitimate time, but for the most part, you get it, right? I mean, it's Bryce McGowan's and JT Thor playing at the end of the first quarter, maybe the very beginning of the second, and you're not getting a ton of production from either one of them. Defensively, Bryce McGowan's didn't stand a chance, which is totally fine for a second round first year player. But it's a very college level rotation that the Charlotte Hornets are running. And I mean that just by the minutes divvied up with certain players on this roster. Mark Williams getting the appearance here today. So what did you make of the rotation that we saw with Boston?
I think this is what we're going to see throughout the rest of the season, unless they trade Mason Plumlee. I think you're going to see Nick Richards sometimes. I think you're going to see Mark Williams sometimes. Even when they took Mark out for these past couple of games, I wasn't really super worried about it or super upset about it, because I really thought that it was going to be like this. You're going to suddenly see Mark, and then we'll see Mark for a little bit, and then we'll suddenly see Nick. I think it's part wanting to get both of those guys minutes as the season goes on, but I think it's also Clifford just trying a few things, shaking a few things up to see what he can get. And both
Steve
of those
told
guys.
us. He directly referenced that earlier. He said, I'm just not wanting to go, a couple weeks without any of these players getting some action on the court. And so Nick Richards, he said he played well a couple nights ago, and it's not fair to either one of them is what he said. But, it's just how it is right now that he doesn't want any of these guys to not get burned at all.
Right. And it makes total sense. But look, this bench is giving you nothing right now. And it's not, Mark Williams had a couple of great plays. I list him in my Every Hornets Boxscore rundown that's going up soon, especially at the end of the third quarter, 3:13. He sets that screen for DSJ rolls, sees Tatum cut him off, and instead of trying to force the roll and call for the ball and not get it, he bounces out for that baseline jumper. That's, again, you're looking at the future of Mark Williams. If he can extend that out to the corner to hit 3-pointers, because that's another big thing from this game too, and both of these games, is that the Hornets have no chance playing these teams that play 5 out. Al Horford annihilated them. And the Hornets don't have any answer for that, right? Mason Plumlee, Nick Richards, and Mark Williams have different skill sets, but there's one thing that they all have in common. They can't hit 3-pointers. Teams know that. They pack the paint. They're able to help off. So, that's a difficult thing to overcome as well. And I don't know really what the answer is. I'll tell you one thing, though. I saw LaMelo and PJ for the umpteenth time this season play really well off of one another, with both PJ's pick and pop, but also, just finding PJ on the roll, and PJ also helping to find LaMelo a couple of times in this game. They have a real great 2-man relationship. But just imagine what it would be like if LaMelo could do that with a center as well. That would be incredible. The Hornets have to find an answer there at some point.
Yeah, and we'll see if they're ever able to do it. I do want to have a few more notes on Mark Williams. We'll get to more Jalen McDaniels analysis, too, with his 26-point outing. He scored a team high in this game against Boston, so we'll get to all of that coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
Steve Clifford talked a little bit more about some of the rest that they're going to get that is abnormal, not having, I think, 2 days off since December 24th is the last time he referenced it in this latest press conference. And so what can they work on to possibly get back in the win column? And we'll do some more of the individual recaps from players that mattered the most in this game against Boston. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is a fantasy app that allows you to pick players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry with that 2 to 6 player pool that you choose from. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available, and they offer projections on any sport you watch. That includes, of course, the NBA, of course, the NFL and the MLB, but also college men's and women's basketball. You have college football when that gets rolling once again, WNBA, esports, Euro basketball, pretty much anything with a round ball. They got you covered at PrizePicks. Safe and fast withdrawals, currently operational in over 30 states and even Canada. So what you can do is download the PrizePicks app, or you can go to prizepicks.com. You can sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks gives you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks gives you $50. You get the idea by now. Don't forget to enter promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. More Locked On Hornets coming up next.
Is Locked On Hornets.
But I have seen him go all the way up to number 10. That was. Is there a warning? Do we need to get out of here?
Okay, here's the thing. I don't know if you heard, but my watch went off, and I was trying to silence it, and then I accidentally hit ping the phone, and then the phone pinged, and now here we are. I'm doing my best, man.
It seems like you're doing your very worst.
Well, sometimes
it seems like I'm actively fighting you today to move.
Sometimes my best is my worst.
It's time for more of the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Let's give the people a little more taste of something positive here, Doug, before we get back into the negative. Just a nice little sandwich method of, we'll tell you something you need to work on, then we'll give you a little taste of something positive, and then something you need to work on again. I'm probably going to be a broken record this season, but I've told you this a couple times now. Just a solid baseline performance from Mark Williams again. I'm growing to really like him as a player. And you talk about him eventually extending that range to the three-point line. It's what Steve Clifford has talked about a lot, with us scratching our head just because we didn't see it at Duke. And even next year, if he starts shooting that at any clip, it will seem a lot faster than any one of us would have guessed. But I'm totally fine with him just taking 15-foot jumpers pretty consistently. The fact that if you have that range and you shoot from a shoot efficiently, I think that matters to open up the space just a little bit for LaMelo. When you're talking about rim runners, right? Most of the time, rim runner with that identity comes not a very good shooter. But that's not the case with Mark. The fact that he is shooting well from free throw lane, you have to not only worry about the 7'1" dude with a crazy standing reach, maybe dunking on your head, but because he's got a high motor, you see him get that dunk in transition, and he runs the floor really well. And he's able to make that read you just talked about, where he doesn't have to go to the rim to be effective. He can pop out a short corner and then hit that baseline jumper. By the way, money, like in rhythm, there was no hesitation. There was no, oh God, what do I do? There was no fear. I'll take that any day of the week. So we'll get that extended range at some point, but totally cool right now. Defensively, he still matters. So where I was sitting in media row, I sat behind the goal this time. Like like 25 rows up, you know what it is. But I was behind the goal this time. Sometimes you sit in the corner, and it's a little bit better view. Like I kind of like sitting there more than the corner because you messed up on the opposite end of the court, even though you're blocked by the goal sometimes. And I just think you see offensive players worry about Mark more so. Malcolm Brogdon, it was the goaltend call, but Malcolm is trying to shoot that real quickly, right? And he hits it off the backboard, but he's shooting it real quickly and he missed it. Now it was the goaltend call. I didn't know if it was accurate or not, but I just think he's affecting guys. I'm just, call me Homer, whatever you want. Love what I'm getting from Mark Williams in 17 minutes that he plays against the Celtics.
Yeah, I thought he was the one bright spot when they broke the lineup in the first quarter. Because remember, defensively, the Hornets were really good to start this game. The starters were basically making up for the fact that they were terrible starting that last game against Boston. They obviously got the message, so everybody was closing out hard. And then they broke the lineup, and things broke. And that's happened many times this season. The Celtics went on a 16-3 run. But the one bright spot in there was Mark Williams, who, does a great job of filling out the paint on the defensive end. And then he's got just a great ball fake to draw fouls. Like, that's going to benefit him. He's a decent free throw shooter, better than Plumlee. So, that's just going to benefit him in the future. That's going to benefit the Hornets because those are efficient ways to get points. But you mentioned no fear, no hesitation. And I think that's the biggest thing that I saw in this game was that there was a moment later in the game when he was under the basket. He catches it, and I believe it was Cornette, the Hornet killer, who was just tap offensive rebound. Like that guy, whenever he plays the Hornets, Cornette the Hornet killer. Like, it was crazy. But anyway, he had Mark Williams trapped underneath the rim. But Mark doesn't panic. Mark doesn't panic. He gets a couple of ball fakes and draws a foul. Like, that's what you want to see out of your center. You don't want to see him fumbling, bumbling around, doing too much, walking. A lot of travels happen in those kind of scenarios. But Mark's smart, man. He's smart. He has no fear. He understands where his feet are, like, at all times. Like, it seems like simple stuff that we're talking about here, folks, but that just tells you where we've been at the center position for a long time.
Well, just to show you, I'm a little sane too about Mark. Like, there's still every now and then some mistakes. I mean, I think, there was one time he came over to the paint. Well, so there was a good play I thought he made where he comes all the way across the paint and then forces an errant alley, if I'm not mistaken. But, there are some other times where he's not finding guys to box out nearly as much. He's kind of standing for the rebound. And so that needs to get a little bit better. He's probably just relying on his height. But, I'm going to take...
he's got to get strong. Yeah, I mean, Cornette knocked him out of the paint a few times. Like, that's not going to change until, he gets some more time in the weight room as it goes on. But these other things, I think the other things that he does well are kinds of things that if you do them poorly early in your career are more signals that things aren't going to go well for you. The body, I think, we've seen it with like so many players. Giannis, was a string bean when he came into the league, and look at him now. So like that can change.
Oh, yeah. The NBA does a phenomenal job of putting weight on you. Now,
what I'm saying is Mark Williams will be Giannis Antetokounmpo level in a few years. Mark it down.
Yeah, or at least Hakeem. So it's one of those two. So I think Jalen McDaniels also, speaking of string beans, another skinny player for the Hornets, did have a good game today against the Celtics.
Career
26
high.
points for him. Yeah. 26 points for Jalen, 5 3-pointers, as I mentioned. That's the most 3-point field goals made he's had this year. Couple steals, running the floor. Mason Plumlee and Jalen had a little two-man game going on at the beginning of this one because you have Jalen just doing what he does well, cutting baseline. And they didn't hit on it as much, but that was kind of the offense they were running at the beginning. And Robert Williams, when he would be matched on Jalen, just sagging off big time. I mean, just not going out there on the floor, which I guess a little surprising because I think Rob can move with Jalen, but anytime that he was on Jalen, he would let it fly, and they were able to exploit that a couple times. Had 2 possessions in the first half where bang, bang hits a couple 3-pointers. Really like what Jalen McDaniels brings. And Doug, we know that he's in the trade rumors right now. So what is this doing for Jalen McDaniels? Either trade value or, oh God, we can't trade value.
Well, it wasn't but 2 games ago in Toronto when I wrote in my notebook and said on this show, has anyone ever tanked their trade value in one game? And if not, Jalen McDaniels got pretty close because he had his worst game of the season.
I got that text
in that
from you.
second game against Toronto. It wasn't just that he shot the ball poorly. It was that he literally did everything poorly and things that really result in you losing games. And he had the one play that, in this one that Clifford called out as like a play that loses you the game by leaking out, not being available for the rebound. Now he counters that by setting a career high. I will note, Walker, that he beat his previous career high by 2 points. Do you know what game he set? He set that this year. Do you know what game he set that in?
I just looked at it, so it's more embarrassing that I don't remember. But no, was it Nets game?
No, it was the Boston Celtics blowout earlier this season.
Oh, okay.
That was in Boston. So really, I think Tatum had a 50 burger in this one. All Jalen has to do is play the Celtics 12, 13 more times and have the Hornets get blown out, and he'll have a 50 burger for himself. But look, he's obviously a little bit of a streaky scorer at times, but he's a talented scorer. You love what he does on the defensive end, even more so though. Steals, blocks, he can kind of do it all there. I think these past 2 games, yes, have been a showcase as to why teams are interested in trading for him, or at least that's what the reports believe. What confuses me, Walker, and frustrates me, honestly, a little bit, is I see different people in the Hornets sphere insinuating that somehow these performances are indicators that the Hornets absolutely should not trade Jalen McDaniels because he's young, because he's inexpensive, because he's a multi-tool player.
Sounds like
that's all.
Something
that's
I might
all.
have said.
Yeah, I think you are in this camp for sure. And that's just like patently absurd to me. Like Jalen McDaniels is not an all-star level player. He should not be untouchable in a trade. You should get a lot of value. And I like that in these reports, Mitch Kupchak seems to be this cat who's saying, well, I really, really value Jalen. I don't know if we can give him up. I hope that's positioning. I hope they can get look, if you get a first rounder for Jalen McDaniels, I think you take that every day and also on Sunday.
Yeah. So I think for me, it's a problem when I get excited about Mark Williams and Jalen and PJ. It's because I get excited within the realm of what they're supposed to be. And so when I talk about how Jalen McDaniels is exactly the player you don't trade, it's because I think he's not going to be a large contract, and I don't think he's going to bring a lot in return. So if other NBA GMs like Jalen, they're thinking that as well, right? Like for me, I just don't think that you're going to get a first round pick. And therefore, it allows me to feel pretty comfortable saying Jalen McDaniels is not the type of player that you trade. There's only one untouchable on this roster. It's LaMelo Ball.
It's LaMelo Ball.
Like that's the guy you don't trade. So
should have said Mason Plumlee right there. That'd have been funnier. If you had said LaMelo Ball and I had said Mason Plumlee, that would have been funnier.
Well, yes. Well, look, usually we're in sync. Sometimes we're just a little off. But besides Mason Plumlee, it's LaMelo Ball. And that's the only untouchable on this roster. As much as I like PJ, PJ could get traded if the value is smart enough in return. But there's a lot of value for it. What's crazy is, too, I was walking right beside him today on my way out of the arena, and he was speaking with press, so that's why it was maybe a little bit later. Jalen McDaniels is freaking tall, man. I mean, it's nuts because I stood next to Dwight Howard, and Dwight Howard is not as tall as he seems on TV. There's just guys that fit that bill where Dwight is supposedly close to 7 foot. No, he is much closer to 6'9".
I think they have Jalen listed as 6'9". Are you saying that that's a little bit of a goof that he's taller than 6'9"?
Seems like 6'10". I mean, look, it's only going off feel, but just a long wing that defends and trading, even if this guy is homegrown. I know maybe even especially Charlotte will do
get
this.
Out of here with the hold on. Get out of here with the
ahead.
Homegrown, because I've seen this from another prominent Charlotte Hornets media member. I won't put any on.
You want no friends today.
Homegrown. Who gives a hot bleep if he's homegrown? I don't care if a player comes from Mars, Venus, the moon. I don't care if they're super talented. That's that's the kind of player I want, like super talented. Here's the thing. If the Hornets, I would totally be on board with this whole line of thinking, right? If the Hornets were like sort of one or two pieces away. The Hornets are, and these two games prove it, the Hornets are not one or two pieces away. This whole thing needs to be rethought, and any player that gives you the potential to rethink that through the draft or whatever, that's the kind of player that you need to consider very highly tradable, not untouchable.
So, yeah, I guess have we turned you against Jalen McDaniels now?
I love Jalen McDaniels. I love Jalen McDaniels.
You want him
Yes,
off.
I do.
You want him. You want to get some Martian from Venus is what you want. You just said it. I heard you.
Martian from Venus.
No, right. Like
I know. Listen,
it depends on the value. That's any trade
conversation. That's it. Here's my thing. This is not about Jalen. It's not about all of the players that I think are tradable on this roster. PJ Washington, Mason Plumlee, Terry Rozier. I love Terry Rozier. I mean, I've been giving him nicknames and loving Terry Rozier for everything. He's a certified gamer. He has a certificate in the mail. Like everybody knows, I love Terry Rozier. But if a team wants to come along and help the Hornets retool this roster, that's what they need to do. It's not about who Jalen McDaniels is or isn't. It's about the potential to rethink this whole game. And I think if you hold on to Jalen because of some weird idea about keeping homegrown guys, to me, that's small market thinking. That is small market thinking at its best, and it's loser thinking, in my opinion.
There you go. Yeah. I mean, it's not like, I guess, I don't know. Let's touch on this a little bit more in the next segment. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Whew, got me hot.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
Doug Branson is hot about people saying Jalen McDaniels should not be traded. I want to get to him, and maybe we'll get to also LaMelo Ball's.
I just don't know how you watch this team game in and game out and say to yourself that any player other than LaMelo Ball should not be traded. I just can't. I just don't understand that. Anyway, all right, go ahead.
All right. But yeah, Doug making no friends here. This episode is brought to you by Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious treat, but don't want all of the fat and the calories, then you got to try a Built Bar. We just got through the holidays. I know my goal is to eat a little healthier this year. It's not working, but what would help is if I could go to something that tastes like a candy bar, but not have all of the fat and the calories. Well, that's what makes Built Bar so good. They have all of their bars covered in 100% real chocolate, too. That's right, real chocolate. They come in unbelievable flavors: churro, peanut butter brownie, the coconut almond flavors. There's coconut brownie as well. There's so many good ones out there. I'm not sure how Built does it, but they're fantastic. And what you can do now is not only do you order them off of BuiltBar.com or Built.com, but what you can do is you can go to Sam's Club, run in, grab a 13-bar box with the favorite flavors that I just talked about, plenty more to choose from as well. So again, you can go to Sam's Club, get 13-bar boxes, or you can order them on Built.com. Thanks for joining us on Locked On Hornets. We got one more segment to go.
Coconut brownie, homegrown, untradeable.
Is Locked On Hornets.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. Hornet, bees, I don't care. You're getting the can. Get away from me, buddy.
Not bees, though. Save the bees, Doug. For the Hornets, like, actually, I don't want a live hornet in my house.
Honeybees?
For bee, I'll cut through.
Because I won't do you. If you're a carpenter bee, if you're not a threat, talk about, here we go. Go back to our conversation in a second.
The Carpenters. The Charlotte
Carpenter bee
Carpenters
has become such a low threat that I don't care about it anymore. When I'm walking by, a bumblebee, I'm not worried about a bumblebee. So I'm just going to ignore it. But you talking a honeybee, small, will sting you, will die to sting. They'll die. They will literally kill themselves in order to sting you. That's how passionate they are. So they're getting the can.
There's something here.
It's time for more of the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Sometimes I miss sitting down, Doug. He's more cerebral. He gives me bee analogies. We got this hot take, Doug, now, calling stuff hot bleep. Doug Branson is
just
different when he's standing
it's
up.
Just, this season has been one of enduring, and I've endured this season.
Yeah. No doubt.
And I just can't sit idly by and listen to people say that someone on here that's not named LaMelo Ball is untradeable. This is not about, I'm not calling Jalen McDaniels out. In fact, on this team, me saying that Jalen McDaniels is highly tradable is the highest compliment, because we know that, like, people are not chomping at the bit. They're not combing through, their Rolodex to find Mitch Kupchak's number and call him up and say, Mitchie, what you got? Like, nobody's doing that.
So that's correct. And just maybe we go one more comment apiece and then we can move on outside of Jalen, right? Maybe we do this.
I got nothing left. You say wherever you want. I'm done.
Cool. All right, cool. My whole thing is, it doesn't mean that the Hornets should be taken advantage of for developing a guy. Like, it does suck when you have a second round pick that develops and then you trade him for something that might not work out if you're talking about whatever. Like, I don't think you're going to get a lottery protected first for Jalen McDaniels, just straight up, because I don't think that's happening. And borderline, like, if you're talking about your 20, any pick in the 20s, you're kind of hoping he becomes a 6'10", 3-and-D wing player that has a little bit of ability to do some other stuff. But you're right. Like, Jalen McDaniels is absolutely not untradeable. There's nobody on this roster that's untradeable outside of LaMelo Ball. It's just, to me, if you are rebuilding and you are looking to invest in assets that help you going forward, the guy that's going to be on a cheap contract that plays well with LaMelo too, by the way. I think there's something to be said for that, where I think those two guys share the floor and play pretty well together, being a three-point shooter and having that motor where he's able to be the beneficiary in transition. I think that matters a lot too. So if you don't get full value for him, then do not trade Jalen. Whereas Terry, Gordon, you don't have to get full value for me to say, go ahead and trade some of those guys. All right. No more Jalen McDaniels discussion. Doug is done. He has said his piece, and we will move on and talk a little bit more. I kind of want to steer this the bench direction, and then we can get to the MVP chance. Just last thing, you're right about the bench not having it offensively for sure. I still look, Dennis Smith Jr. has been phenomenal defensively. He's the only guy you can trust on Jayson Tatum in this game. I mean, he he at least made Jayson work a couple times, and he had it going, 51 points. But a lot of those buckets came against other basketball players, right? Not just Dennis Smith Jr. So the defense is phenomenal, but Dennis is just not hitting 3-pointers anymore. 0 of 4, had a wide open corner 3. They didn't really hustle to go close out on DSJ, and he missed it. 3 of 10 from the field for Dennis Smith Jr. and 8 points, but you had 17 points off of the bench, and they came from Mark Williams on efficient shooting and only 4 field goal attempts, but 8 from DSJ, and he had 10 field goal attempts. So offensively, it's just not clicking.
Without Kelly, without Gordon, they have no sixth man. And so it's going to be even more difficult to win these games when you don't have someone you can rely on when you go to these like 4 bench, 1 starter lineups, and Terry Rozier has to take all the shots, or LaMelo Ball has to press and then get frustrated and make fouls that he shouldn't make, right? I mean, some of that is happening because he's playing with, a bench unit that can't shoot the ball. It's a shame. I mean, this is the DSJ, unfortunately, that we thought we were going to get at the very beginning of the season, before the season started. We thought, like, all right, this is the DSJ, can't shoot, has trouble making shots at the rim, is a better passer than people give him credit for, probably has lost a little bit of his athleticism an explosion because of the injuries, but he's great defensively. Like, that's what we thought we were going to get, and we got something wildly different than that at the beginning of the season, and I think it got our hopes up. But we've seen this so many times when guys get injured, and their games, one particular aspect of their game goes away. Sometimes it comes back, sometimes it doesn't. Just tough luck for the Hornets. I'll tell one thing that the DSJ does allow you to do is have a little bit of versatility when you've got all these guys out. They've gone to 3-guard lineups with LaMelo and Terry and DSJ. That's helpful. When LaMelo was in foul trouble in this game, they were able to go DSJ and Terry, and that lineup worked really well while LaMelo had to sit with 3 fouls in the first half. DSJ, despite the shooting, I mean, it kills you, but despite that, he's still a valuable piece for whatever it's worth in this season.
Yeah. Well, no, and I do think the defense, like, I thought it was a nice enough pickup with rim pressure and defense at the beginning of the season, but I will say I think he's been quite a bit better than I imagined. I think defensively he's actually a lot better, and I value that a lot, but of course you got to hit shots. All right, last thing here. So I know a lot of people were talking about this on Twitter, and it happened right away. Boston heavy crowd. Spectrum Center, it was pretty filled up today, but a lot of Boston people, a lot of Jayson Tatum jerseys. That was the most popular one. I saw a Taco Fall jersey. I saw an Adrian Griffin jersey. That's right. I saw that as well. So I saw some decent ones, but lots of Jayson Tatum jerseys, and those jerseys, they were screaming when Jayson went to the foul line, MVP, MVP. Early on, there were some Hornets fans, maybe from the rooftops, trying to boo Jayson Tatum to outweigh the MVP chance, and they were losing, but it was a valiant effort. Like, it wasn't, it wasn't a 20-point game.
Just like the Hornets.
It was a 10-point game.
Perfect.
Everything was a 10-point game. And then at the very end, it was blowout city, because once Jayson Tatum went for 51 and then hit the last 2 3-pointers to really very much so end this one, it erupted. So I ask you, Doug, how does it make you feel as a Hornets fan when there are a lot of MVP chants? You're fighting just to drown it out and keep it at an even level. And then Boston, the fans, the arena, it's as loud as I've heard the arena for the opposition. And maybe I don't need that caveat. It's certainly well within that neighborhood, man. How does that make you feel?
Well, listen, it's embarrassing, but it's not embarrassing for the city of Charlotte, which is a transplant city. It's got a lot of people from all over the place, growing really fast. For those people that don't live in Charlotte, don't know anything about the city right now. Right now I'm living in Nashville, Tennessee, and it's booming, but Charlotte's right there with Nashville in terms of like boom cities right now. So a lot of people moving to Charlotte for a lot of different reasons. So yeah, you're going to have that. So it's not embarrassing for the city of Charlotte. It's not embarrassing for Hornets fans. What have they got to cheer for? It's not embarrassing for the hardworking ticket salespeople. They shouldn't be held accountable for this. They got a job to do, sell tickets. It's not embarrassing for the season ticket holders. Again, what has this organization provided them? This is embarrassing for the organization. And I hope the organization is embarrassed. I hope people are watching the Bally Sports broadcast and going, wow, our Spectrum Center, our home court has been turned into somewhere where these big teams come to cheer on their people and not where we can get the city of Charlotte behind this team. And that is because of decisions that this organization has made to not do things when doing things would have made the team better, to avoid the luxury tax at all costs. And it's kind of riled me a little bit last season when Borrego would get on the city of Charlotte about like coming to Spectrum Center and cheering the team on. It's like, after all of these years of Bobcats and then going into the Hornets era, after all of these years, it's not up to fans anymore. Put a product on the floor that's worth coming to see night in and night out. I've always said this: casual fans, your 40-year-old mom and dad that are not huge Hornets fans, but they're fine. They watch basketball every now and then. They got to make a decision. What are we going to do with the kids tonight? It's a weekend. What are we going to do? And that decision comes down in terms of basketball. You want to take your kids to go see a win. And if they're not reasonably sure that they have a chance at seeing a win, then they're not going to go. And a casual fan has to understand that without watching all the games. A casual fan is not watching every single game. They're not watching this show. They have to just sort of fundamentally understand, and that takes playoff wins. That takes playoff series wins where you're watching them on national TV, where the news is talking about them all the time. That hasn't happened for 20 years. So, lay off Charlotte, lay off the people, lay off the fans, lay off the ticket sales people. This needs to be totally on the organization.
All right, that'll do it. Ending with some fire because Doug Branson is fiery today, and we appreciate him. We also appreciate you for making us your first listen. Now make your second listen. Game to Game NBA. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NBA, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Have a great rest of your day. We'll be back with you tomorrow.
I'm homegrown, though, baby. Untradeable.